welcome back to the BizBlend podcast. Listeners, where strategy meets soul and modern business gets personal. I'm your host, Sana, and today we are diving into a hot button topic: leadership and management. Aren't they the same thing? Well, not quite. And more importantly, they are not mutually exclusive. And listeners, joining us is Greg Kaiser. He's the founder of Management Mastery, a mentor to over 1,000 managers, and someone who climbed from the mailroom to the C suite, literally. Now, Greg brings 4 decades of hands on experience, hard won lessons, and global perspective on what it really takes to lead people and also manage performance. Now, from imposter syndrome to billion-dollar restructuring, Greg's journey isn't just impressive, it is instructive. So, let's break down the barriers between leadership and management and learn how the two together can transform culture and outcomes. So, with that, Greg, welcome to the show, and I'm really honored to have you here with us.
Well, thank you so much, Sana, for that really nice introduction. I appreciate that,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
great to be joining you. So let's get started.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for the kind words. And Greg, to begin with, you have said that management is a craft, which I also agree, one that starts with the ABCs. So let's first try to identify the gray areas in there. What do you see most managers skipping or undervaluing in their early development? That comes back to bite them later.
Yeah, so thank you for teeing that question up that way. If you look at employee surveys, companies go out and they talk to their employees and say, "What are the things that you're satisfied with, dissatisfied with?" Every year, year after year after year, going back, I forget how many years, many communications from managers is always at the top of the list. People are saying, "Hey, my manager, like, they don't communicate clearly, they don't communicate frequently enough." So we had this crazy idea at Management Mastery that if you center management activities around communication, all the different components of management start working better.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a different approach. We also have the not quite crazy idea, but kind of that managers, and you talk to lots of people on your podcast, right? Managers are not particularly well trained to be a manager. They're trained in whatever their technical area of expertise is, but then they put them into this management role, and the expectations are very different, but they don't train them how to be a manager. Yeah, so when I was wrote a book a couple years ago, so I went out and interviewed a bunch of people, and
Mm.
I said, "Okay, when you became a manager, you're manager, you're executive now. How were you trained?" "Oh, it was trial and error. I just had to figure it out." I'm like, "Well, they don't do that to coders. They don't do that to mechanical engineers. They train them how to do the thing that they do." But
Mhm.
companies routinely will do this to managers. They're like, "Okay, you're the most productive salesperson we have. Therefore, we're going to make you a sales manager." Well, being a sales manager is really different than being a salesperson. So it's just that, have you seen this? You do talk to lots of people. Have you seen examples of this?
I mean, personally, I've seen examples. And um, that's where the difference, lies. A particular, let's say, as an employee, I am an excellent individual performer.
Yep.
I am a performer. But then when it comes to people management, I may not be the best, and someone who is, let's say, an average or somewhere in the middle as an individual performer may be a much better people manager than me or than that star performer. I've personally observed this. In cricket, so in India, we we all worship cricket. Um, star batsman. Uh, sometimes we have seen this. A star batsman is not a good captain, but then a good captain, maybe they may perform on certain days, but on certain days they may be completely, out on duck. So that's kind of the observations I've personally made. And I completely agree with you.
Well, so the way you teed that up is interesting. So I like to make graphics of things.
Uh-huh.
So we'll have to visualize this, but I'll explain it in hopefully a way that it's easy to understand.
Mhm.
As you think about the progression from an individual contributor up through the management ranks, think of it as a four-layered cake, right?
Okay.
The bottom layer is the person's an individual contributor. They get
Mhm.
their first promotion, they become a manager, usually of things. You're a customer service manager or you're a manager of a small work group. Then they get their next promotion, then they become a manager of a function. You're now the manager of the human resources department or the engineering area or sales, marketing. And finally, the top of this four-layer cake is you're a manager of an enterprise, at which point they typically don't call them managers anymore. They're executives or C suite people. But it's been helpful to take people through this because the skills at each one of those levels are very different. And the hardest transition to make is going from an individual contributor to that first level manager. It's just a very hard transition. Once you get to that level and you learn the ropes of management, whether by trial and error, or maybe you're lucky enough to get a mentor, then you just scale that skill set to, okay, now I need to manage an entire function, which means I'm a manager of managers. And then you get to the very top level where you're an executive. Then you are the manager of all the different functions in the organization, as well as managing the next level of executives. And if you can take people through that and say, okay, and people usually start nodding their head and say, oh, yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. It's calling out the different skill sets that are required at each of those levels that really shines light on, geez, we could probably do a better job of training our managers. I forget where I
Mhm.
saw the study, on it was 83% of managers said they did not, negative, get any training when they were promoted into a manager role.
Wow, that's staggering.
In organizations, they don't do that in other roles. I mean, they don't send the door-to-door salesman out without sending them to some sort of training class.
Yeah.
But they take somebody who's then responsible for getting other people to execute, and they don't train them. It's just this is why I started doing what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Um, I like teaching, I like coaching people, and over the years, I had developed this tool set, and people would call me all the time and say, "Hey, can you send me this thing? You remember you talked about this at this conference? Can you send that to me?" This and that. I'm like, "Sure, I can do that." And oh, by the way, I could probably also do this as a business because
Hmm.
people are interested in improving their skills. And beyond improving their skills, the thing they're really, really interested in is getting better results.
I agree. And what I believe, and then I guess many folks believe that there is a difference between leading and managing.
Correct.
Um, I mean, I also believe that leaders, they inspire, they not only manage people, but they also mentor, guide in so many ways. And managers are just there to execute. What's wrong with that split, Greg? And how does it oversimplify the role of a great manager?
And son, I would say this is the most what you just described is the most common conception or perception of managers and leaders. People say, well, there's a manager in the left hand column, and then there's a leader in the right hand column, and I will list the attributes of both. I turned that on its head a little bit and said, no, if you make it a Venn diagram, you have two circles. You could put managers in the left hand circle and leaders in the right hand circle. The point of intersection of those two circles is a great manager, great leader. They have both of those attributes. So think about how many different leadership development training programs you've seen. There's lots and lots of them. Well, there should be a blended management slash leadership development program because the skill sets aren't mutually exclusive. If you're doing a good job managing, people all of a sudden say, and by say good job managing, it's there's some criteria for that. You communicate well, you lay out plans, people understand, etc. All of a sudden, people start to say, "Wow, you're a great leader." Because I was joking with somebody the other day, and I said, "Look, I never set out to become a great leader. I just wanted to be a really good manager." And magically, almost, people started saying, "Yeah, you're a great leader. We're going to put you in charge of bigger and bigger things." I'm like, "Well, that
Okay.
wasn't my goal, but okay." You know, and it's because I understood if you view these things not as you have to be in one column or the other column, you can do both, but you need to be trained on both.
Hmm. So, uh, I mean, it's the combination, the blending of both the skills, inspiring and leading, and at the same time execution as well, because you have to get the work done. So it's just kind of the blend of both the skill sets.
It's a blend of both skill sets, and the way that you move from ideas to action in the
Mhm.
business is through communication. So
Mm.
I'm working on a course right now on business communications. I put that in a special class. It's different than regular communications. Talking to your brother or sister or mother or father, business communications are different.
Mhm.
But in a business communication, when it's done well, you're not just telling people, go do this, go do that. You are providing them with the why. And once you
Mm.
provide them with the why, they take it over and they have a purpose. And that's what motivates them.
Mhm.
Simply telling people to go do this, go do that, not telling them why they're doing it or how it contributes to the organization. You might get the people to do those things, but they're not going to bring a whole bunch of energy and enthusiasm to it. If they have a purpose, they will bring a ton, and you don't have to do anything else. They supply this energy and enthusiasm themselves because they then see themselves as part of something much bigger.
Mm. True, true.
And sorry, I interrupted you there because
Yeah,
I was on a
yes.
roll, Sana. If you want me to stop, you have to say, Greg.
Yeah, and Greg, I'll just interrupt with this, observation, especially in startups and um, you know, newer companies. They promote people too fast, without real management training. And you like mentioned this observation
Yep.
at an Uber level, but with respect to startups, what are the long-term costs of skipping the fundamentals in there?
Well, it's a great case study. Elon Musk, if you remember, famously went and slept in his plants while they were trying to get started up. And so this is a terrific demonstration of his desire to make the thing successful. But not that many years later, he did an interview, I think it was with the Wall Street Journal, and said, One of the things I didn't recognize in my startup days, I thought I could do everything. And he said, when I finally realized I had to go out and hire professional managers, he said everything started working better because he said that is a different skill set. He's very tech oriented and creative and he's a visionary. And fortunately, when he was relatively young, he recognized all those things are fabulous. You got to have them. But if you don't insert some professional management, these visions and these ambitions aren't executed and realized. I use that example because everybody knows who Elon Musk is, and he's been pretty successful with a couple of three different companies.
Yeah. That's a very, very I think relatable example. Relatable, and this is true, because irrespective of the size of the startup or the success, if the founder is doing everything, it's just a one person show, um, then the founder themselves is not able to be creative, to get their idea or get their company to the next level, and that's where it becomes like a stagnant, the growth or maybe the execution becomes kind of stagnant. And then most of the times the founder is more into the redundant tasks or solving or putting out the fires. But
Not the
then
things they're the best at, by the way.
yeah, yeah.
Well, this is you may be familiar. It's a different podcast, All In.
Mm-hmm.
Chamath Palihapitiya, and there's a couple of David Sachs. There's a couple of people in there. They're all venture capitalists, and they have a very clear-eyed view because they work with founders and startups all the time. That one of the biggest benefits they can bring, other than the venture capital, is this professional corporate governance and management. They'll
Mhm.
go in and they'll work with firms and say, okay, you have this great idea, but you can't tell me what your cash burn rate is. When are you going to run out of money? Like that's management 101 stuff. And these supervisionary people just don't think that way. You need to parachute that kind of expertise in, and they hate it, by the way. You know, super creative people typically don't like those type of restrictions, constrictions,
Oh,
but it's a
mm.
business and there's requirements to sustain a business.
True, true, true. And then that's where the CTOs, the CEOs, the CPOs, the CHROs and everyone, they have their role to play in there.
And that's why particularly in a startup, that management team is so important because startups don't have real deep management ranks. It's the founder, maybe have a chief technology officer, you almost certainly have a chief financial officer.
Yeah.
When oftentimes the thing that would be helpful is to bring in a chief operations officer.
Yeah.
Who
CEO.
is the person that's gonna connect all these parts and get them to run together?
Exactly. Exactly. Absolutely. And as you mentioned about CEO, this brings me to ask you a bit of a personal question about your own journey, Greg. That you built your expertise from ground up, from mailroom to CEO. If you can share with us maybe a glimpse of that journey. I know it can be really difficult in such a short span of time, but what specific mindset shifts did you have to make at each stage of your climb?
Well, so great question. So I can assure you, working in the mailroom does not prepare you for any higher level role.
Okay.
It's pretty mindless work. But
Mhm.
I knew I wanted to be in management. I wasn't crystal clear about what that was, but I wanted to be in management. So I got promoted to a couple of different levels and I got really lucky. And this is a good takeaway for, the folks that are listening. I got really lucky. I can't describe it any other way. I had a good mentor when I was in, I don't know, second, third roll up getting promoted.
Mhm.
Guy would bring me into his office every week, sit me down and say, "Well, tell me what you're working on." So I described to him what I'm working on. He's like, "Do you understand how what you work on fits in the rest of this company? Why you do what you do?" Well, I mean, at that point, I was so young in role. No, I don't really understand. So he would very patiently explain it. And he said, when you do this, this, and this is what happens in the rest of the organization. He said, eventually you're going to be in my job. And he was a couple levels above me, which I didn't believe him at the time. And he said, you need to understand how all these things fit together. He said, because as you move up through the organization, you're going to need to fit all these things together. And he said, when you do it well, everything runs better. So, and I was very also fortunate. I guess it's a innate characteristic. I like to learn new things. So as I moved from level to level, I was continuous. I got my college degree going to night school. And then I got an MBA when I was in my late 40s. I like to learn new things.
Okay. Okay.
And, I got an MBA. This is people always find this interesting. Like, hey, you're 40 years old, you're pretty successful.
Exactly. Uh-huh.
Why do you need to go get an MBA? I'm like, well, I don't understand corporate finance well enough. And it's embarrassing to sit in a room and not be able to participate in the conversation. If there's one thing an MBA does, it really trains you in corporate finance. They drill it into your head. So I got that out of it, and it ended up working out pretty well for me.
This thing really connected with me. Even if you were in your 40s, but you still decided to go for MA because typically and anyone would say that, that time is already gone. Now you are so much experienced that MBA wouldn't be so much fruitful for you. It would be just a wastage of your time and money. But
Well,
if
it's no, this is a great point, Sana. So the fellow that I was reporting to at the time, my boss, I went and said, "Hey, I'm starting this MBA program. This is not really going to affect my work. It's a weekend program. I will have to take every Friday afternoon off." Um, and he looks at me and said, "What do you need an MBA for?" He's like, "I don't have an MBA." And I'm like, "Well," so I explained it to him. I said, "Well, you put me into this job and these are the responsibilities of the job, and I don't understand corporate finance that well." And he just could not understand why
Mhm.
anybody in their, and at that time I was in my mid 40s, would want to go back to school.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Nah, I just like it. I like learning new things." I mean, I'm 60 something years old now. We just started a new company last year. So we're learning how to use AI and we're learning how to do all these. Well, I'm being overly generous. My wife handles the marketing and the back office technical stuff very, very well. Um, which fortunately we complement that each other in that regard. I like creating content, and then my
Mhm.
wife does the probably harder work of taking that content and building it into something that can be delivered digitally as well as marketed digitally. Those are different skill sets. So you have to understand,
Yeah.
hey, I know my limitations, and that is not something I'm good at, but I'm blessed. My wife's good at it.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Wow. A lot of creativity and and Greg, you have worked across 5 continents.
Yes.
Um, what's one universal truth about people management and maybe one cultural difference that taught you a tough but a really, really important lesson?
Yeah. So the one management across all cultures always comes back to the mechanics of management. What are the numbers? We have input costs and then we have revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Revenue exceeds our input costs, we are profitable. You don't need to make it any more complicated than that. Now, to unpack it, you got to make it a, I was getting ready to swear, but I won't. You have to make it a heck of a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But if you can try to boil things down so that anybody can understand it, that's really helpful. You can use that regardless of what culture you're in.
Mm.
So, one of the difficult lessons that I learned, and this happened to be over in Asia, a
Okay.
little farther. What would that be? A little farther east than where you are.
Okay.
Um, sometimes you can't take what you hear at face value. This is
Oh,
why I love this. I loved working in India. I managed a couple plants there and spent a fair amount of time there. Super easy to work with the people in India. You know, they you can sit and talk to them. They'll talk with you. Not the same as you go farther east in Asia. The messages tend to be more veiled, symbolic, whatever word you want to use. And
okay.
I got lucky because I kept getting burnt. I'm like, wait a minute, we agreed on this. They said, no, we didn't agree on that. We talked about it, but we didn't agree on it.
Okay.
You know, grit teeth. And there was a marketing manager from Korea. She worked in our Seoul office, and she said, "Hey, you should get this book called The Asian Mind Game." Because I was telling her what I was experiencing. I'm like, "What am I missing here?" Like, I just like we're not on the same page. And she's like, "Get the book. It's called The Asian Mind Game." And I apologize, I can't remember who wrote it. And she's like, I've recommended this to tons of Westerners who now find themselves working in the Far East Asia, and it's really helpful. And so I've recommended that book to tons of people that, you know, find themselves job responsibilities or such. They end up getting parachuted into Far East Asia. It's a very, very helpful book that
Asian mind
it
game.
helps you cut through that symbolism and, you know, the not quite clear communication.
Hmm.
It also requires a great deal of patience, which, you know, on some of my not so good days, I'm not real patient. But it taught me that too.
Wow. That's quite interesting. I'm going to take this away. I'm definitely going to take this away. And it's really, really strange if rationally if we think anyone, let's say I'm going this for the first time, I would say, but why do I need to understand from a specific cultural point of view? Because,
Oh,
at the end of the day, I'm just managing people. So irrespective of the country they are in, the basics remain the same.
I
But
can tell you a funny cultural story.
okay, okay.
So I managed plants all over the world, and
Mm-hmm.
in U.S. plants, depending on where you are in the plant, they play music. So
Okay.
I'm managing this plant down in Brazil, and I said to the plant manager, I said, "Hey, you know, we should start playing music out in the production line." He's like, "Oh, no, that's a really, really bad idea." I said, "No, we won't play it any place where it creates a safety issue, but people seem to like it." So he's, "Nah, that's a bad idea." I said, "Well, let's just try it." You know, so we get these speakers set up and we start playing music. Everybody stops working and starts dancing. I mean, everybody that could hear this music. So the plant manager is standing next to me. He's like, "I told you this would happen." I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't listen to you. My bad. I should have listened to you." Although the people loved it. They thought it was hilarious that, you know, unfortunately, we did have to stop doing it because you just could not get them to not move around when they were working.
No, no, I understand. I understand. Wow. So communication, continuous learning, um, definitely, definitely. So you just cannot simply say that, oh, I'm already so much experienced, I've got my degrees and everything figured out. I don't need to learn. That
Yeah,
kind of
that's a very dangerous mindset.
uh,
You know, so consider what's happening right now with artificial intelligence. And there's, you know, there's debate going on. What's it, you know, is it going to eventually pay out? Okay, that's a valid debate, but it's not going away. You know, I'd liken it to when spreadsheets first came out. Everybody stopped doing general ledger journal accounting, and they shifted all of those functions into spreadsheets, which eventually became much more sophisticated. And you end up with things like Oracle and SAP. But
Mhm.
It's gonna be the same way with AI. Yeah, they're in the startup phase, and it's kinda painful, and it's clunky, and it makes mistakes. It's gonna get better and better and better, so it will be helpful if you become knowledgeable about how it works and what the potential is for it. If you say, "Well, I don't need to know that because, I've already gotten this far in my career." Yeah, but what got you here isn't gonna keep you here. You gotta
Okay.
keep learning these new things because you're gonna try to do business with people, and you're not gonna understand what they're talking about. Well, we've got these generative AI bots, and they're doing this, this, and this, and if you haven't spent the time to learn about that, the conversation's done, or at least your part of the conversation's done.
Yeah. True. Wonderful, wonderful, Greg. So talking about your book before we wrap up,
Sure.
your you're promoted. Now what?
Yeah.
It's a book for new managers. Quite a catchy title.
Well, my wife came up with that catchy title, by the way.
Has the
She's creative.
cheese creator. Absolutely. So, uh, what about the experienced ones, stuck in kind of survival mode, especially the mid-level managers? How can they rediscover mastery and momentum? Any powerful small moves they can do?
Well, because the example I like to give people, and I do need to come up with a cricket example. I use a golf example because people play golf all over the world. Tiger Woods is a really good golfer. He has a
Mhm.
coach. He has a bunch of coaches. He has a putting coach. He has a driving coach. He has a mid iron coach. Tiger Woods, the greatest golfer out there, one of them, arguably. He's got lots of coaches, and they're not teaching him new things. They're going back and they're saying, "Hey, you've drifted from the fundamentals in this area." So if you look at a mid-level manager who's struggling, chances are good that they've drifted from the fundamentals, or maybe they have an outage in one of those areas, that getting some additional education on that and saying, "Okay, here are the components of management, here's the mechanics, the techniques that you need to learn to do these," tends to be very helpful. That it comes back to the fundamentals of management. They change slowly, and typically it's additive. You add new things. So if you were a manager in the 1960s,
Mhm.
you probably didn't have to know that much about technology. If you're a manager in 2025, you better know a heck of a lot about technology and its applications. That and it's the same way with communication. How do you communicate with people? Well, that has changed over time. At a point in time, you used to be able to just give people direction and that was it. They were expected to go do it. It doesn't work like that anymore. Nobody wants to work for a company that operates that way.
Exactly.
And if you've failed to evolve, if that's the right word, if you fail to evolve and continue to refresh your skill set, you will plateau. The people that have continued to nurture their skill set end up with a bigger skill set.
True. True. And I think this is not only in the professional setting, but as holistically, if I can speak, and I am coming from a millennial generation. We are seeing such a pivotal shift in the way people look at life, especially the Generation Zs, who are
Mhm.
already now ending in the workforce. Now, a few years after Generation Alpha will be also a part of the workforce. So there's so much difference in the way we look at a particular aspect of life. Whether it's learning or it's working, it's earning money, building a presence, building a brand, the lifestyle, everything, thought process, mindset. Apparently, Gen Zs, they are giving more importance towards mental health. Millennials, especially during COVID and post COVID, they are now also giving importance to mental health. And now gradually, even the boomers and the baby boomers, they are now understanding that how important it is to evolve with the different times. It may not be favorable as per your principles, or the times that used to be there back in your era, but you have to keep on evolving, because hate it or love it, if you do not evolve, then you kind of will be outdated. That is
Oh,
true.
you will become ineffective.
Exactly.
So roughly, because I worked in an organization, they brought me in. This was a consulting engagement, and they were struggling to, I'll summarize, get things done. So I went in, I sat down, I talked to all the managers, and they were all frustrated. They said, "Look, we tell these people what to do, and they just won't do it." I'm like, "All right, well, let me come and sit in some of your meetings." So they go in, they tell people what to do. Go do this, go do that. And I pulled them aside. I'm like, look, I said, I had your HR people create a histogram of who your employees are. They're mostly millennials with a couple of Gen Zs in there. You can't just tell them what to do. You have to tell them why they're doing it.
Okay. Yes.
And this was just such a shock for them. Like, what do you mean I have to tell them why? They just have to get it done. Like, no, no, they want to understand why. Like, this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. They want to understand why. They want to feel like they're part of something big. So, we made a couple simple changes in how they communicated with people and explained the purpose for doing things. And a lot of their "I can't get people to do anything" problems went away. Most people knew not only what they were supposed to do, they were told, but why, how it helped them understand where they fit in the bigger picture. And people got more motivated. Like, oh, I'm part of this big organization. And when I do this seemingly small thing, it has this gigantic impact. Well, somebody has to be patient enough to sit down and think through that and explain it to them. And if you get frustrated and say they won't do what I tell them, it's not them, it's you. Like, look in the mirror, it's not them, it's you. Which people don't like to hear that message, by the way.
I know. I know. I know. Wonderful. Wonderful, Greg. So, if our listeners would like to connect with you and get a hold of your book and your wonderful resources that you're sharing, what will be the best way?
Sure, and thank you so much for asking. So, easiest way to get a hold of me is via LinkedIn. It's Greg Kaiser Sr., because Greg Kaiser Jr. is also out there. Um, and the book, Management Rescue, You're Promoted Now What, is available on Amazon, like most books. And then our company website is managementmastery.solutions. We had to wait till the .solutions domain became available. We thought it was clever because we provide solutions.
Yep. Yep.
But it's a weird website name. It's not, managementmastery.com. It's managementmastery.solutions.
That's once again creative. It's creative. Wonderful. I'll make sure to have the link and all the details in the show notes. And
I appreciate that. Thank you.
this was such a great trailer to your master class, literally and figuratively, and definitely, it kind of challenged my perspective on leadership and management, because until now I always used to think that these two are absolutely different.
Most
Um,
people do.
yeah, and it definitely helped me understand, and I hope for all the listeners as well. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sana, and have a fabulous. If you're in India, it's really late, so have a fabulous night.
Thank you, Greg, and to all the listeners. If you have ever wondered whether you are leading enough, managing too much, or just stuck in the fog of imposter syndrome, I hope today's episode definitely served your purpose. And leadership and management are definitely two sides of the same coin. When balanced, they don't just move projects, they move people. And to connect with Greg and check out his book, You Are Promoted. Now what? Refer to the show notes and also learn more about his company, Management Mastery. Until next time, keep blending strategy with soul. And this is your host, Sana, signing off from BizBlend.